I'll say come during warm weather months. Everybody is very grumpy in the winter times and cold weather months. Uh, Daylight is short. It's cold. Yeah, come when it's warm. Fall, spring, summer.
All right, go when it's warm and we can actually could we get a hello? Or is that
Maybe
forbidden?
it's definitely more likely. I mean, your chances increase exponentially, but I don't want to say it's a given.
Okay, so the typical New York is like, don't make eye contact.
Yeah, exactly. It's the what are the things called for horses? I'm blanking on that word.
The blinders.
Yeah, the
Blinders.
blinders. Yeah. It's definitely
Yeah,
blinders. Just stay in your lane.
stay in your lane. That's beautiful. Tell me about a win you had recently.
Oh, definitely. An exciting win that I want to say. I'm going to give it a twofold. One is we released an awesome product update for our dashboard that allows for some customizations on the reporting that you want to see for overview of your project status. That's on the product side. And then on the, I'll call it business side, a win is we just had another, I'll call it convert of a legacy product onto Jet.Build. So those are two exciting things that happened in the past week for me.
Getting
Yeah,
technology moving forward. Are you all
exactly.
taking it? Has the open AI swept over Jet.Build yet?
No, not yet. I've had these questions come up and they're always fun questions that relates to just AI in general. Um, I think that there's going to be space for these kinds of integrations, maybe in the near future. At the same time, still tackling the element of addressing the essential technology across our industry. So I think we need to first and foremost tackle your basic operations tech before we get
Yeah,
into AI as it relates to like widespread adoption.
good stuff to consider. I think it's just top of mind for people. And,
Definitely.
you being, I'm just going to classify you as a technologist. I'll put a label on you.
I'll take it.
We're going to look to you for guidance in that type of way. So
I'm here for it.
that's good.
Welcome to the EBFC Show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction.
Today's episode is sponsored by
Bosch Refine My Site is a cloud-based construction collaboration platform that applies lean principles to enable your entire team to plan, communicate, and execute in real time. It's the digital tool that works in tandem with your last planner system process and puts it all together in one simple, collaborative ecosystem. This easy-to-use platform is available in English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and can be used on desktops, tablets, and mobile devices. According to Spencer Easton, scheduling manager at Oakland Construction,
Refine My Site, in my opinion, is the best, leanest tool on the market for last planner system.
here's what our users have to say. We've looked at 3 other digital scheduling platforms and none compare to the straightforward approach Refine My Site takes. From milestone planning all the way down to daily tasks, this program gives every general contractor and their trade partners meaningful collaboration, accountability, and KPIs. Register today to try Refine My Site for free for 60 days.
Today's show is also sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Now, to the show. First, by thanking all the good people at the EBFC show for coming back every single week. Super appreciate you, the growth we've had on the podcast. Definitely, we're going to have all of Adam's contact information down below in the description below. So check that out for his links. And if he's done what he's supposed to do, his profile picture and his bio links and his bio will all be there just waiting for you. So that's Adam's cue that he might have to do something if he hasn't already done it. We'll find out. But for those listening, Adam, could you give people just a short who you are and how'd you get into software and technology for construction?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks so much for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story with your network, with your listeners. So I appreciate you and your listeners equally. So thank you for that. In terms of my story, my background, and why Jet exists, I actually really appreciate all this story. I love telling it. My co-founder and I, Joseph, we actually know each other first as enemies where, we battled high school sports against one another. So a funny start to our relationship there. Fast forward a bunch, we both somehow end up in the same military enlistment in Israel, in the Israeli military as airborne, so as paratroopers. Then again, fast forward a bunch, we both end up in New York City working for real estate developers in very similar roles, different companies, but hands-on as it relates to, being on construction job sites every day, where our responsibility, our role was to ensure the accountability of all project stakeholders. So, contracting teams, design teams, developer teams, meaning ourselves, lender, city, so on and so forth. And in that experience that we had, we recognized the, gaps in efficiency or inefficiency, gaps in productivity, the, crazy manual entry, time sucking, administrative tasks. All of these kinds of elements that are, I'm sure, very, day-to-day relevant to a lot of your listeners. We took those friction points, and said, let's create a solution, for ourselves that'll help us push our projects forward. That'll help us, deliver on time and on schedule projects. And that's quite literally what we did. So we started creating features, Jet.Build, that were supporting, our roles. So submittal, RFI, workflow and management, drawing and file management. And that's really where we started to, kind of just, push our projects forward, to remove kind of the manual repetition in terms of alerting teams that they have to respond to something and finding what they have to respond to, and all of that craziness that exists across multi-company project stakeholders. So over time, we recognized that those features, that starting point was really supporting what we were doing, and said, hey, let's just continue to add features here. And that's what we did. So fast forward a bunch, we ended up with, what we have today, Jet.Build, as this end-to-end solution, from pre-con development stages through construction operations and collaboration functions, in addition to your accounting functionalities, wrapping that all together with data reporting, and then allowing for, a streamlined effect for your project operations.
Adam, you're speaking my love language. It's all this efficiency. And I've got to think that your time in the military, definitely being airborne, had some kind of influence on your approach to business. And tell me, like, when you first came into the real estate, your real estate development is where you started, right?
Correct.
When you first came into real estate development, fresh from military service, what was standing out? Like, what seemed like so odd that you had to ask somebody, is this normal?
So, kind of what I've alluded to in that story, which was the shifting of information across companies in a scattered environment, whether that was email chains, Excel files, meeting notes, and then trying to consolidate it. So being from the developer side and with the role and responsibility of ensuring project success, I had to pull all this information together in, without a platform. I was using Excel, and recognizing that it wasn't sustainable, it wasn't efficient, it wasn't productive, to do that manually, throughout a project, especially if you had more than one, active at a time, to then alert people that they need to respond, to then use that information to report to, our boss as well as the lender, to, collaborate with the city. And in that madness, in that mess, we realized that it wasn't the way. It wasn't organized. It wasn't structured. And I'll use those two terms as kind of a plug to kind of what military is. It's very organized, very structured, where you have repetitive processes in order to produce efficiency.
Yeah, you got standards in the military, right? And you're airborne, so you're jumping on airplanes, right? Or not. So you're jumping on airplanes. Construction parallels for the listeners. Paint us a picture. What was it like before you jumped? What did the military do to get you ready for your first jump?
Definitely. So actually these protocols are pretty typical no matter where you are, coming from the perspective of infantry. And probably that has overlap with other divisions as well. But then I'll say even more so when you're airborne, because obviously you have that added element of danger jumping out of a plane, right? So taking these perspectives is the understanding that, first of all, showing up every day, putting in effort, putting in work, because when you show up and when you put in work, that allows you, work meaning training, right? Training, learning, checking, that allows for the, largest potential positive outcome. I'll call it, talking kind of broadly here. with that said, on your kind of day to day and these parallels with what goes on in construction is, you got your checklist, you got your equipment checks, you got your, scrum meetings, right? You're meeting with your team and understanding what you're accomplishing for that day. You have then your after action reports. You're checking how your day was and what was good, what was bad. Then you're going to your next day and repeating that cycle while also improving on whatever area you could improve on.
Yeah. So that protocol you talked about, like getting ready, and we're like jumping at the bit, like construction people, we know construction, we know that frustration. I mean, you just mentioned like a lot of work, a lot of pre-work to happen before the
Definitely.
actual work can happen. Are you doing checklists? Is it like body conditioning? So like if I blindfolded you, would you be able to get ready to jump out of a plane blindfolded? Are you that well trained? Is there that much rigor that goes in to getting you ready? And I'm gonna bring this back to real estate development. I'm just setting you up, Adam, right now. Don't worry.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. Happy to talk any topic really. So the answer is yes. I mean, in reality, the majority of our jumps, and when I say majority, that's like 95+% are actually at night. So you do lose a lot of visibility. Not to say you can't see anything, but that is to say that you have to be so comfortable with your actions, with what you're doing, that you can do it at night, that you can do it in conditions that are less than ideal, right? And I'll actually add one more element that I missed is the ability to work with people that you didn't necessarily grow up with, that you weren't necessarily, would be hanging out with, or that you wouldn't necessarily know, right? That's another element in military training that also translates very well into no matter what you do, right? Is understanding how to be empathetic to others that you need to work with, how to communicate with others that, may have different opinions or perspectives or, upbringings.
Yeah. So with all that, you get out of the military, you go to work for this real estate development company. Your buddy's working at a competitive firm.
Mhm.
Did you guys get together and talk? When are we going to get trained? Like when's the training going to happen? Because I got to think that, a lot of people say OJT,
Mhm.
right? Does it happen when your boss yells at you for doing the wrong thing, for missing a deadline? Is getting yelled at in a real estate development office considered OJT?
It's funny. I was prepping that answer, and then you said it in your question. So that's awesome. Yeah, it was kind of funny how, that was my experience. That was my partner's experience, where it is that OJT environment where it's like go sink or swim essentially.
Sink or swim. That's
yeah,
one of the construction phrases, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you know Adam is the real deal, because he said sink or swim. I can't
exactly.
tell you. I've got I don't know if I'm traumatized, Adam, when you said that out loud, or if need more therapy sessions, but that sink or swim phrasing is we don't say that and I'm not military trained. I've had a lot of relatives that have served, a lot of friends, and thank you for your service. But we've got people getting trained, getting ready, getting prepared, and then contrasting with the construction industry where there's a ton of tradition. I mean, there's clear ways how we do things. But what's not clear, what's not consistent is that training part. And I just like to give a little shade to the audience, because we don't often have somebody with your experience on the show, Adam. That's why I'm going a little bit deeper
Sure.
into your background, just so people could hear just another place in the industry where it's consistent.
Mhm.
We make people come to work, and maybe we train them, maybe we yell at them, maybe maybe we show them how to do stuff, right? So you're pulling together all these different, you mentioned RFI submittals. You're responsible for what the contractor doesn't do. And then you've also got all the people, the future tenants of what you're going to be converting into space that you're going to lease or sell.
Mhm.
Right. So of all those things, and you hit a lot of the things, what made you like walk away from that and go straight to Jet.Build with the quote unquote, the competition? When you said
Sure.
it was Yusuf or Joseph?
Joseph.
Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah.
You walked away with Joseph. Did you convince Joseph, or did Joseph convince you? I want to know. I feel like you convinced him.
No, that's funny. We'll have a laugh about that later, but it's actually pretty unique to what is your, I think what people typically think of when they perceive of a newer company or startup, where what we did was we actually built up our product over a few years, for ourselves, right? So we were building it first and foremost as the operator, saying, okay, a scheduling tool would be neat to have. Project budget and bidding management tool would be good to have. How about insurance tracking? How about permit tracking? And we just kept adding these feature sets over time realizing that, it was useful for us in our case. And then we were also, which allowed us to really segue, I think, to the next level, was onboard what we call design clients. So people in our network, external builders or external clients in those earlier kind of beta stages, which allowed us that additional, third party or external perspective for us to hear their feedback and implement to then finalize our product and release it to the market. And then at that point, and now like kind of full circle to answer your question, at that point, we basically got together and we're like, well, hey, wait a minute, like we actually have this fully operational product. We actually just happen to gather some clients just from, network and word of mouth, essentially, right, from being in industry. And we said, hey, like this is really interesting. Let's dive in. Let's do this thing. And we connected with our VC who led our fundraising round to really allow us to jump on full time. Shout out partners. So shout out to them. They're really awesome, real estate tech focused venture capital firm. And that's the story. That's kind of how we really decided. Yeah, now it's time to jump on full time, grow the business, grow the product. And here we are.
You said something also, like we've got a lot of triggers, Adam, and
sure.
The one you mentioned was insurance tracking. So we have a lot of project managers listening to the show. Tell me your before and after insurance tracking story. Like how did Jet.Build change how you tracked insurance on your project?
Yeah, totally. Oh man. So, there's actually a few, I'll say it, 3 like administrative paths, I'll call it, that were consistently falling on my plate and consistently, increasingly difficult, right? Increasingly difficult to track as you add, additional, stakeholders, right? Whether that's contractors, designers, et cetera. So really anyone on a job site, and you realize, oh, wait a second, I can't manage, staying on top of dozens of different companies, right? And I mean, you could, but it's silly waste of time. So that's kind of the understanding and recognition that on the insurance side, like COIs were expiring or late, and now holding up people from coming on job sites in the risk mitigation element there, right? Not wanting for people, trades or design teams to come on site if their insurance was expired, to not ruin your entire project. And that's kind of the inception of it. It's to say, oh, wait a second, we can actually just automate these reminders. We can actually just allow people, adults, right, professionals, to be accountable for submitting their insurance. And then, and this concept of unlimited users, which is what we offer. Now I could also actually onboard my insurance broker, my insurance team, and say, hey, I want you to approve it on the app rather than on an email chain or a phone call. Now I have confirmation, timestamp confirmation saying, oh, my insurance is good. Automated reminders are going to me and the person whose insurance it is, a team whose insurance it is, and anyone else involved. And now all of a sudden, all of that administrative craziness is automated and really simple when you need to take action on it. And then I mentioned, I'd say a few others. So another example is permit tracking. So same kind of a concept, right? Is to, automate those reminders when things are going to expire, allow for professionals and adults to be accountable for things they need to, submit and track. And then the last one was inspection management. So there's 3 kind of feature sets, I'll call it, or really awesome administrative additions that allowed for a lot of space and just time space for anyone involved in that.
Yeah, that's a huge change. Now I'm wondering, like, I know it took work to automate that. I've done some software coding myself, like secret. I almost have computer programming, but don't tell anybody. Secret's out now. But I'd say, like, where did your time go when you gained that time? Where did you shift your time in your current job when you're still working your job and using the software to help automate aspects of your role?
Definitely. I mean, it would go to all of this time savings would shift to proactive management, right? So it would shift to, all right, now all of a sudden I could look at what is seemingly going to be an issue, right? Like I could see our Gantt chart schedule, which is what we have on our product as well. And I can see the logistics of, this for next week doesn't make sense. Let's shift who's going to be on site. Let's shift who's going to be, productive so that we don't, bottleneck ourselves. And then beyond that, if, space occurred to an exponential degree, which pretty infrequent, but if it did, then, I'd go home earlier, right? I'm not at the office or not working from home extra hours.
Yeah. Did you hear that, project managers?
Yes.
When you use software, automation, and proper accountability, you get more of your own time back so that you can maybe go home early or be proactive. Be proactive is like managing that Gantt chart schedule item is going to take a little more finessing than just watching lines go red or bars go red, right?
Totally.
So
Totally.
I think that's a good transition. Now I want to hit on, what are some of the benefits? Because now you're looking at things and you're operating it more like your project is a portfolio. You've
Mhm.
got these different things happening, administrative things, schedule, time, of course, there's money involved. What does the Jet.Build's cloud-based command center give you that you didn't have before? What's the after effect of that change?
First and foremost, what I like to kind of point out is it allows every individual to do more. So all of a sudden you can now scale with the same headcount, I'll call it, right? Because each individual now has this command center where all information is being populated to one central platform. So it's really simple, not to mention all these automations and reminders. It's really simple to check in on what's happening, where errors are looking like they're going to occur, where they're actively occurring, and address everything across your project, whether it's construction operations, whether it's collaboration needs, whether it's accounting functions, and push those out to the proper, responsible stakeholders in a matter of a few clicks.
So you're creating like using visual controls, which I love. Toyota production system principle number 7.
Shoot.
That's what it's use visual controls to make problems visible. So now you've got that signal. How do things on the dashboard signal to the user at a glance that something needs a little more attention?
Yeah, definitely. So on your overview page, your landing page for that project, I'll break it into two sides. One, on a very simple answer, is you have an open items tab. So if you're an external party on an individual project, you'll see all of your open items, obviously related to that project. If you're like the PM, for example, I was sitting as on the developer side and had multiple projects happening, I would see all of my open items across all of my projects, across all the teams. So regardless of what your position or your role is in the project, and one page and one glance, you'll be able to see real quick, what's open, what's coming due, what's overdue. That's one. Now on a project specific basis, regardless of user, you'll have that dashboard overview where you can edit what you want to see. So if it's, open RFIs and open submittals, you'll see that on a chart, right? On a chart, as well as a log status. It's up to you. You'll be able to see, in status of your insurance, you'll be able to see status of permitting, of punch list items. So really of all functions across your project that you get to decide, what does your overview look like? In addition to those specifics, you also get a calendar outlook. So like similar to any calendar, except in this case, it's populated with everything that you're involved in or responsible for, which allows you also to click and address those items specifically and quite literally one click.
Wow, it's amazing. What kind of users on a typical project team are using that dashboard heavily?
Well, I would say, really all users involved. So whoever is responsible for each trade, each stakeholder, right? So if you have, all of the contracting trades, so every party responsible for organizing how that team is operating, it'll be that person per trade. Probably whoever's managing party on the GC side, same as the architect, the engineer, the developer. We have lender parties on the product as well. We touched on insurance before, right? So insurance teams. So it's really all encompassing. And with that said, there's also permission controls that are very simple. So for example, if you're onboarding your insurance team, they, probably don't need access to any of the construction functions. They probably don't need access to the accounting function. So in quite literally 2 clicks, you give them access specifically and only to the insurance module. And when they log in, that's what they'll have access to.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. What's an interesting story you can share from one of your users, like how switching to your system from the a la carte smorgasbord buffet of, Excel spreadsheets? What have you heard from people?
Definitely. So, I'll kind of bridge it into two stories that kind of the same general concept where you'd have your user who is, on a legacy product, and then you have your user on the smorgasbord, Excel files and whatever. When onboarding, first of all, recognition of, okay, here's a central tool that I can use that's intuitive, right? That's a key word that, we've built Jet with that underlying dynamic is an intuitive product. So you don't need a certificate. You don't need like crazy amount of training. If you know how to use a smartphone, you're certified with Jet. That's first of all. Second, and the key element that is always so neat, and it happens pretty frequently because we really push it, is feedback implementation. So you have the users who are on legacy products who come and say, hey, my past product that I was using doesn't have, QA, QC reporting in a specific capacity. So we say, okay, let's dive into that. Let's see what you're using, meaning you're pulling out those functions and then creating your own like kind of custom report in a way in Excel. See what that looks like and let's implement it for you. And our average implementation time is actually only 12 days. So people are always very appreciative of that. And we're really serious.
Hold on a second.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
your 12-day implementation to a solution
Yeah.
is less time than the average RFI on a $50+ million project. I just want to put that out there in comparison. And while we're doing disclaimers, I want everyone to know that Jet.Build does not sponsor the EBFC Show podcast, but Adam contacted me from a beach in Mexico. And so we had a nice long talk about, what he's doing for the construction industry. And the point of the show is always to show easier, better, faster ways of building. So I just want to get those two housekeeping things out there, Adam.
Yeah,
And you
thanks
said
for that.
so yeah, you're welcome. So 12 days to implementation, and then they're off to the races. Like what's something that they say, like, name somebody, like they anonymize it. So use a fake name like Johnny or Susie or whatever, Michelle or Rebecca, whatever name you want to use.
Okay.
I want to hear what's something that they've switched over, they've used it. What's the first like knee jerk thing that they tell you?
The intuitive nature of the product. That's absolutely the first knee jerk reaction. And the reason for that is, either they're using a product that took them a long time to understand, or they're using nothing. And the knee jerk reaction is, oh, wow, I'm now realizing how simple this is for me. And I'm realizing the space that I've now created, the time that I've now created for other tasks, like we were talking about before. That's knee jerk reaction. Second layer of diving in, it's the feedback implementation that we were talking about before. So we will actively reach out and say, hey, how's the product going? Do you see any thing that would support your, process better? And, when they do get feedback and we really encourage it, then we have that power and the ability to implement. And I kind of say that, what we're doing is we have clients across the country. We're happy to expand across the globe, and hopefully that'll occur pretty soon. And what that means is, we're getting feedback from builders, contractors, design teams, best practices of all sorts and all types, and then consolidating and funneling that into a best practice product for end users. So they get exposed to how everybody is building in the best ways, and they get to leverage that in one place.
Nice. What's the average size project you're seeing implementation on? Like, is it a couple $100,000, $1 billion? What's the range of the typical?
Yeah, right now we're about like 92 million or so in average project size. We have some like custom home builders out on the West Coast, and then we also had your high rise $200 million project sizes as well. So we really could scale to the size of your operation. Typical kind of a SaaS model, I'll call it.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because people are going to be wondering, like, what's your website, Adam? How can I see a demo, right? Like just natural things. But before people think about that, Adam's going to answer that for sure. If he does what he's been asked to create his bio, and all those links will be in the show notes below. But I want to get to dive deeper into a little bit more about how is this benefiting other real estate developers today?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a really neat, I'll call it angle and concept. And the reason I say neat is, and I'm a little bit surprised by it, the awareness that a developer should be involved, I don't think is like standard, or I don't even know if it's majority, right? So coming from the perspective of a developer who happens to be hands-on, I realize, oh, this is what makes the most sense, right? If I'm paying for a project and that property is going to be mine, I should want to know that there's transparent accountability for all the teams involved, even if I'm hands off. That's one angle. The second angle is, I should want to know that all project stakeholders have a tool to collaborate with. That's another element. And then the last element, which is kind of, I like to separate the two areas, is data, right? So if I'm the builder and I own the property, whether I'm selling it or I'm managing it as an asset in my portfolio, I very much should want that data. I should want that information. That's what I'm paying for. You could leverage that for active projects for that project. You could leverage that for your next project, for your portfolio of projects. You could leverage it with asset management teams. You could leverage it for a sale. You could sell your property and say, hey, here's a clean data package on everything that was involved on that property. So, I really strongly advise that developers get involved. Can only support the process. If they don't want to be on construction sites every day, they don't have to. They just issue access to whoever is managing their project day to day, whether it's the GC, CN, architect, whoever.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. Like, you're tapping on that distinction that some developers historically, stereotypically, are a little hands off
Right.
until it comes to contract payment things.
Right.
Then they're very much hands on and make their opinions very clear.
Right.
So
Right.
I want to contrast that. Like, how do you see Jet.Build addressing the needs of the general contractor who's trying to coordinate and manage, sometimes on the jobs that you mentioned at your size,
Mhm.
like that 300 plus million, we could have like 90 trade contractors on that
Definitely.
project.
Definitely. So I like to look at it as this like two-way street, right? I mean, it can't be, your contractor is battling your developer who's battling, the design team, and that's a cycle of pointing fingers and battle. Like it's so silly and doesn't make any, it's not productive, right? It's the opposite of what you want to push a project towards success. So again, the concept of Jet is this transparency element across the project. So if you're the GC, then, now you have simplified reporting to your developer. Your developer should be able to very quickly and easily look at, the payment app request that has been submitted and say, oh yeah, I can see, based on the daily reports that is in the same place, producing, a workforce report showing me who is on site when, that could tie to this payment app for me to say, yeah, this does make sense, which is tied to project schedule, which is tied to lien waiver submissions, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the elements that are required in, that process for the GC, whether it be operations or requests for, a payment or application payment app, however they define that, however they word that. It's supportive of all these angles. And then, not to mention also the design team who has responsibility in, responding to changes, responding to information needs, responding to, specification updates as the project proceeds, et cetera. So it really brings all of the teams together. So to remove that finger pointing and to allow for people to, be responsible for what they are accountable for.
Do you visit some of the sites that this is deployed on?
Yeah, definitely.
What's the morale typically of the sites like after a healthy deployment? Like, what are some things you notice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if I could say, I would love to just make stuff up right now and say, all of a sudden, no, it's been the best project of all time. Yeah, I don't know if I can say from the project site that.
Let me ask it this way. So
please.
you walk into a job where
Yeah.
Jet.Build's been deployed, right? It's a computer application. I'm not saying you're going to walk in and see everybody's got the dashboard up.
Sure.
But what do you notice people doing? Do you see people more in their computers, talking? What's your first, think of the last 3 jobs you walked into.
Yeah.
You just walked into the office. What are they doing before they look at you?
Thank you for remodeling that question. Immediately what came to mind in the middle of when you're asking that is meeting minutes. So we do a really nice job at allowing to digitizing meeting minutes and allowing for that kind of central collaboration, which also allows for linking tasking items with, that automated follow-up reminder and such. It pulls from prior meeting agendas. So that's the thing that comes first to mind is recognizing how meeting minutes are being used and tracked versus, the craziness of, multitudes of way of how people do that, whether that be with, handwritten notes that they then write up and send out, whether that be on Excel files or whatever it may be. I think the meeting minutes is a sticking point that I typically see as a significant change in productivity improvement.
Yeah, so you walk in and like a lot of project managers, that's like the bane of their existence. Like that's
Right,
one of
exactly.
the first things that they can't wait to, rise in the ranks so they can have assistants to delegate that to, or, everyone, the first
Exactly.
things that I did when I got in is like, I never typed so much in my life until, when I got out of school, like all of a sudden I was just doing data entry every single day, from
Yeah.
daily
Yeah.
reports to meeting minutes. And I got really good at meeting minutes. So
Nice. Nice.
it's kind of cool to hear that you've got this automation happening for the follow up.
Mhm.
I see a lot of people, and you mentioned like this sharing and this mixing of like better practices across the country, even from
Mhm.
design houses to general contractors. What's a good for anyone listening? Like, what's a good protocol to follow? An issue comes up in a meeting, like software agnostic. How do you track
Mhm.
that? What do you recommend? And then tell me, how does Jet.Build make that seamless?
Definitely. I mean, first and foremost, having an agenda. I think that's very important. If you're able to have people require people to review the agenda prior to the meeting, super important so that when the meeting starts, it's actually, productive in the sense that you're moving forward rather than, eating up time, just revisiting things. That's first and foremost. Second is to create actionables, whether that's during the meeting or after the meeting. That's very important with, who's responsible specifically for what, with what specific timeline of, return and or order of whatever you're assigning. Um, and then I think lastly, a central place where you're, again, software agnostic, just a central place where you're tracking and logging all of this, between, the meeting minutes itself, the agenda itself, who is there, and the responsibilities or the action items that occur after. So those would be the three elements. Yeah, even if you're using a notepad, that I think are really important. Um, those are also the elements that we're addressing. Digitize.
Well, I got to say, Adam, like as you mentioned some of those things, I've been on jobs where all of those things are missing, and
Right.
those
Right.
jobs are chaotic. And so, like everybody listening, this is the part where you pause, rewind, take your notebook out, write some notes down, and just look, where on my project am I missing some of these things that Adam said is the better practice across designers, general contractors, developers, trade contractors. These are all good things. I completely agree with you, Adam. Having a clear agenda ahead of time in advance so that people can actually prepare. And like that's the caveat, because some people like,
Yeah.
surprise, here's the
Right.
agenda. You're like, well, I'm not ready to talk about that.
Right.
Right. I see that happen too. So those are all really good things that you're sharing. I
Definitely.
want to transition back to the military because it's
Sure.
just like it's so cool, especially being airborne. So I got to tell you, Adam, like you didn't know this the first time we talked, but my parents were in the union when I was younger.
Mm.
My dad in particular was in the UAW, United Auto Workers Union, and we had to go to this camp. It was in Black Lake, Michigan, and they had a United States Army Ranger airborne was
Mhm.
our camp counselor. So and he was like a drill sergeant in the making. Like it was clear to all of us young kids that this man, we'll call him Joe. Joe wanted to be a drill sergeant in the future because it was his job to march us around and to sing all these like songs about how amazing it is to jump out of a C-130. Like,
Sure. Sure.
but
Look,
all, all that aside, as a special forces veteran, in all seriousness, leadership is something that we talk about, and I think people have a lot of misconceptions about leadership in the military. So I think it's worth. I'd like to hear your perspective. You served in the Israeli Airborne. What is leadership like? Do people give leaders the benefit of the doubt based on rank? Tell me more about like how do you give and get that leadership and following relationship?
definitely. So, speaking from the special forces perspective, and I highlight that in particular because it's to recognize that teams are much smaller. They have more autonomy in what they do, than a typical, I'll call it brigade, who, is much larger in headcount, thus has, more protocol and organization and that kind of effect, similar to a business, right? So similar to, how that could translate into your civilian life per se. But so in the special forces perspective, it's very much about relationship building. And with relationship building, there's respect. With that, there's also understanding of how to communicate. And with all of that, particular to military experience, is that you're doing all of this in very high stress environments and very risk incentive environment. So that's to say is whenever or if ever you, lose your cool, or if you make a mistake, the, outcome is, very extreme versus in a, civilian environment. So in having that experience and in learning how that works and how that could affect how your day to day you're operating in the military, you definitely have hesitation before you, go out of line. And that's a mutual respect piece. I don't mean that in the sense of, hierarchy. Rather, if you see something is wrong, you should go ahead and present that to your commander, right? But you can do, which is always okay, so long as you do that in a respectful manner. So I would translate that one-to-one to, civilian life, right? So, always a way to communicate something, always a way to be respectful, so long, as you do that in a respectful manner, right? So you should always feel free, this is my opinion at least, to communicate if you think something can be done better, if you see an issue, if, you recognize something in yourself even, right? You could do all of these things, in a respectful way.
Yeah, I love that, relating it back to respect. That I am wearing the Respect for People shirt polo today. It's on full effect for those of you listening, podcast only. Check this out on YouTube. You can see the Respect for People on my shirt right here. I forget with this mirrored camera what side it's on. It's on my left side over my heart.
Yeah, you got it.
But what just to lighten it up a little bit, what acronyms from the military do you find yourself remembering on a daily basis?
Oh, interesting. So that's going to be a little bit tough in the translation.
Just give it to
But
me in Hebrew. Come on.
well, putting me on the spot with that. I top of my head, I'm putting a blank there on
You blanked out, so
acronyms. I'm blanked
you're
out.
just totally let it go.
I did.
Let the call your commanding officer, your last commanding officer, and be like, he's gone rogue. He's gone rogue.
I have a funny thing where whenever, someone wants to know a specific thing, like what just happened right now, you say, give me the acronym for that, or like, what is that word again? What's that person's name? I'm always like, oh, yeah, you got me there. And then I'll probably remember in 20 minutes.
How about what's a common Yiddish word that you use on a daily basis in New York?
Common Yiddish word.
I've given you a lifeline.
I'll say the Hebrew word, something, which is patience. So if you could remember patience, if you could remember to breathe, you'll probably, figure out whatever it is you're tackling in that moment better than if you didn't.
All right, that's good. I'll take that, Adam. Thank
There
you
you
so
go.
much for that. Patience is so key, especially in our business where
Definitely.
we've got all these change makers, but sometimes we're called do-gooders or goody goods, try and make things easier and better, and solutionizing for other people, as my friend Jesse says, right? But now,
Definitely.
with all of that, and I think you're right, the leadership translates pretty well in the civilian world as well. There's good examples and bad examples, and like you said, a nuance is the consequences for bad not as harsh in
Right.
the civilian area. The stresses people feel arguably probably very similar. I'd say what kind of projects or notable initiatives has Jet.Build been involved in that you would say is like definitely helping this thing grow beyond your first solving problem for one customer yourself?
Definitely. An angle that we're looking to support in on this concept of, that bring back the trades and support, people, wanting to join the construction industry, which is an awesome industry to be in, is the education angle. Is to say, hey, not everything is or needs to be so outdated. Here is a tool that you can leverage to literally learn the process. And then when you learn the process, recognize here, you could digitize what's happening. It doesn't all need to be, backwards or I'm blanking on that word too. So,
Old school.
Old school. Yeah. Doesn't need to be old school for everyone.
Analog. Doesn't have to be analog.
There you go. Analog. Thank you for the lifelines.
Yeah, you're welcome. I've got so many lifelines I'll throw out to you.
Listen,
I'll just keep throwing it out there. Infinite lifelines. Just consider me like that safe harbor.
amazing.
Just to get my I punned up this morning, so I'm all ready. This is you thought I was drinking coffee, but it's actually just a pun cup.
You trained for the podcast.
That's right. I became a dad, and I gave a lot of bad jokes to my son that never land.
Nice.
Like yesterday, I told my wife this one, and she said with like just deadpan face, not funny. So she's a huge Cubs fan, and there's a guy, his last name is Hap, and he just decided he's going to re-sign with the Cubs. And I said, it's funny how Hap found out what was happening, and he stayed with the Cubs. She's like, don't even. So I'm just so glad that you laughed at him, because I'm going to make this a clip. This one's going to be for you, hon. Yeah, this is going to be a good clip for.
Happy to be a part of it. I think actually you preceding the joke, the pun with her reaction, made that all a little bit funny.
Yeah, I laughed, and I said, "You're not laughing; it's making me laugh hard."
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I've been known to crack myself up every day. I want to give it to you, Adam. You're going to get the last phrasing. What is something you want to leave the good people of the EBFC show with as they go out onto their projects?
Don't get stuck in a way that you've seen operations been done just because it exists. Recognize that there's always a way to improve. Don't be afraid to propose a means of improving. And let's help push our industry forward. That's what I want to leave it with.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thanks so much, Felipe. I really appreciate it.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.